When I started reporting College Unbound a couple of years ago, before it came out in 2013, I spent a lot more time on college campuses and in high schools and with employers talking about the outcomes of higher education. What did parents and students want out of college as they were looking at it? What did older students want as they were thinking about going back? And of course, what did employers want out of this system? And what I came to realize was that institutions know so much more about their students than students know about their institutions. And I really wanted to level the playing field in writing College Unbound. So I'm glad that college officials are reading it, but it was mostly aimed at students and parents because I really wanted to aim that, even that playing field that I saw so uneven in reporting the book. I'm not an academic, I'm a journalist. And so I approach this again from the outside, and I go and I talk to the experts, I look at the research. In journalism, they say 3 anecdotes equal a trend. I look at both the quantitative and the qualitative research, and then try to translate it for a lay audience. And much of what I'll be doing today is looking at the research and looking at the trends over the last 20 years or so. My hope today is to push you to be thinking about the future of higher education in a new way. In many ways, because you're here today and because of what your institutions are already doing, you've been on the leading edge. And in many ways, I don't think that's good enough anymore. As Todd laid out in that slide about the trends, how the trends have just changed from 2013 to 2015, the depth of change in higher education is going to be tremendous in the next 10 years. And to stay ahead, you're going to have to do more than just have a suite of online programs in addition to whatever potentially you might be doing on the ground. Because higher education, in my mind, is really going to change in these next 10 years, and I'll be talking about who's going to be driving that change and the trends that are going to be driving that trend. But we noticed that there were many different motivations and mindsets for why they wanted to get a bachelor's degree. And a couple of them fell into that traditional grouping of students, right? There were the young academics. These were, the typical students who come out of high school very highly ranked, usually come from upper middle income families. They are very serious about their studies. They probably want to go on to professional school someday. When I was editor of the Chronicle, I used to have a ton of presidents come through my office, and everybody wanted more of these, right? They all wanted more of these young academics. One reason why, by the way, it really helped their U.S. News and World Report rankings. Then there was the coming of age students, right? These are the students who go to college as a maturing experience, right? That avenue between adolescence and adulthood. And then there were the career starters who are, in my mind, increasing in number. And these are students who at the age of 18 kind of know what they want and they want to get their career started as quickly as possible. And what was interesting as we started to dive deeper into the data, we discovered that those career starters were in many ways at the age of 18 had much more in common with adult students, the career accelerators, who were coming back to school to get ahead in their career than they did with their peer group, their 18-year-olds, right? They wanted many of the same services that those 34-year-old or 40-year-olds wanted, but schools saw them as two completely different groups of students because they were thinking of them as traditional or non-traditional. And then there were the industry switchers. There were a lot of my old colleagues in journalism who now have to go back to school to figure out a new career. And the last group that we identified were what we called the adult wanderers. And these were students who went back to school to get a degree, not quite sure exactly what they wanted to do, but they knew they needed a degree to get ahead in their job. And then we sized them. We made estimates of the size. And as you can see, the young academics made up almost a quarter of the group, and they were the largest, but not very big for how many institutions, in my mind, are trying to go after that one segment of the market. There's simply not enough of those students to go around for all the institutions that continue to go after these micro segments of the market. And why is that? Well, first of all, institutions have a lot of debt, right? We tend to talk, Todd mentioned in his opening, right, the student debt bubble, right? All the numbers that we hear every day, the stories that we see every day in the newspaper talk a lot about student debt. We rarely talk about this number, institutional debt, right? Which has almost doubled just since 2001, according to Moody's Investor Services. Now, we all have debt in our lives, right? We have debt to buy cars and buy houses, but we expect our salaries to at least be maintained or go up when we take on that debt. And the problem right now in American higher education is that 75%, it's an amazing number to me, 75% of American colleges and universities have flat or declining net tuition revenue. 75% according to Moody's. I was talking to a CFO at a small private college recently, and he was telling me that their net tuition revenue today is the same as it was in 2008. Net tuition revenue, same today as it was in 2008, even though they've been raising their sticker prices by 4% every year. And I said, well, what's your plan? He said, we have no idea. We have no idea. We're just going to keep raising that sticker price as much as we can to at least generate the same amount of revenue we did in 2008. And what I think is happening as I've been researching this next book is that 40 years ago, when fewer people needed a bachelor's degree to succeed in life, you used to go to college to kind of get that broad education, right? This is the traditional model of how we've seen the American life, right? Post-World War II. This was the life that my father, who's about to turn 80, lived, right? He got his college education, graduated and went and worked for one employer for 33 years, and then one day he decided to retire and retired, right? Very linear, very simple. As I talk to students today, whether they're high school students, college students, or recent graduates, and even many of our lives, I think, are like this, it's a much different model, right? It's a much more wide open sea that we're trying to navigate, and it's much less linear than my father's life was. This is a model that Tony Carnevale, who's an economist at Georgetown University, recently came up with. And he looked at Bureau of Labor statistics going back to the 60s and 70s. And in 1983, he saw a switch. He saw a switch from that old model to the beginnings of this new model, where students graduate from college and they move into what he calls a learning and earning period, where they're not really in a career for a while. Then they eventually move into a full-time job, which, by the way, they're still never done learning, and then transition to retirement. They don't easily move into retirement and then eventually move into full retirement. This is a great quote from Alvin Toffler, talking about this idea of literacy in this century will be about those students who can learn, unlearn, and relearn throughout their lifetimes. So what does this look like? Right? Right now, we have kind of this, we keep talking about the diversity of American higher education, and sure, we have big colleges and small colleges in urban areas and in rural areas. We have publics and privates and for-profits. But for the most part, and I've been on a lot of campuses over the last couple of years, for the most part, they really operate the same, right? They all start usually in September and end in May, right? They have 14, 15, 16-week semesters. So for the most part, they're very much alike. And I think in the future, we're going to see many different pathways through higher education. Some of them, I think the institutions that will survive and thrive, are institutions that set up multiple pathways for students to go through. I could be sitting at home on a Saturday afternoon and I want to learn something quickly. I could sign up for his course and within minutes be taking it, right? I don't need to apply. I don't need to wait for the course to start. I don't need to wait for an admissions decision. I could get on, learn what I want, and get off quickly. Well, one of the things I found about change in the last couple of years is that we tend to overestimate its speed, right? We think it's going to happen tomorrow, but we tend to underestimate the depth of change, right? I think about my own industry, right, the newspaper industry. When I was sitting at conferences like this in the late 1990s, and somebody said, one day, people will read a newspaper on a desktop computer, and we're all shaking our head, never going to happen. And what are we reading newspapers on today, right? Devices as small as this that we could have never predicted even 10 years ago. Thank you for your time today. There's a microphone at the center of the room, and welcome questions or comments. Thank you.